welcome to a bit of a brand run through. My name is John Capper. I've been a designer for about 20 years, mostly working with brands, but across a bunch of different formats, mediums, and with a really diverse range of clientele. I'm based out of Melbourne, Australia. And yeah, you can find me on socials via Twitter, Instagram, Dribble, all the other usual ones. I'm not on Facebook too often. Actually, I'm kind of weaning myself off. But let's get stuck into it. My presentation tool of choice at the moment is now Figma, which is absolutely brilliant. And I will run through this particular branding presentation in Figma. And this is how I actually present to a client. The brand in question is Superior Seating, which is it's a importer of kind of like the replica range of chairs, if you will. They're not super costly, but they are fairly decent quality, not originals, I don't think, from my understanding. And this is something I put together quite some time ago. I do most of my work in Illustrator, but then for presentation purposes, bring it across into Figma. If you haven't used Figma, it's like Sketch on steroids and all cloud-based, and a really beautiful tool and a great experience. So let's get stuck into it. So what I start by doing, I have all these kind of logo panel here, you can see with the full logo is set to about 800 by 380. And the reason I do that is so when I'm looking at all my projects in Figma, I can kind of just see the full logo and it takes up this entire panel because it actually displays that first page. So that's the reason for that. So let's get stuck into it. This is the overall brand style guide, something I walk through and present to the client that contains all the assets they need for their brand, or including color palettes, typography, etc., etc. So let's start over here. And the first thing I have is the logo mark. I do import all the colors as well, so you can see the color palette over here. And you can see the purple line that's around this. Now the reason why there's that is because in Figma I've created this as a component, and what happens is if I use this in a bunch of different arrangements throughout the whole presentation, and I want to make a change, I can kind of if I make a change to this component, it ends up making that change globally. So if I change it to black, you can see it actually changes all of them. I'll undo that. And that's super handy. It becomes a kind of standard component throughout your whole kit. I'm sure you've seen this a lot in the UI UX space. Tools like Figma Sketch do the same. So I create components of my logo, and these are brought in as EPSs from Illustrator. Once I'm done with Illustrator, I don't bring in kind of raw type. I'll export to SVG and then import that SVG file into Figma, and that way, if I command Y, you'll see it's super clean and really quite tight. So I've created a component from the SS mark, the actual Superior Seating type mark, and then here, this is a component that actually combines these two components. And that way, every time I reuse it, it's actually exactly the same as these three core kind of main components, the parent components, if you will. Over here is my color palette, and what I do is I actually import that and create a local styles color palette in Figma, which is super easy to do. Essentially, if I drag out a square and give it a kind of random color, what you do is you click up here and create. If I click here and then click this little plus, it'll create a style. And so I've created a style for all these colors, and you can see I've not only created the style, but I've named them. And these names I actually use a website. I'll show you here. It's called Name That Color, or at least that's what the title of the page is. It's chir.ag. If you just Google Name That Color, spelt with the American way, COLOR, you'll come across this site. You can then basically input the hex value, and you can see it'll give me a name here. It's called Scarlet, and that's really quite handy because I prefer to have a naming system across my color palette rather than just say the pink or the fuchsia and the teal. I can refer to it as the bittersweet. This one here I haven't actually assigned it, which is that one, which is jumbo, tuna, cod grey, etc. So that's just the way I do it. I don't know how you guys approach that, but I really like to have a naming system on my colors, and because it's a digital presentation, I keep it as hex colors only. If they need PMSs, I can kind of color match that and send it off for printing and stuff like that. Over here I show the logo, the full logo on a darker palette, just to show that it works and what changes. And you can see if I drag this light version across here just for comparison, you can see over here, when it's over this dark grey, this little tiny little part of the S actually gets lost. So I've inverted the type to a white and then lightened that just for the purpose of this kind of dark grey version. And then this one again is a different grey as well. So some slight changes, but I think the brand consistency is kind of quite solid. And I did want to have a variation where I can use the logo on dark. Over here is an example for the client of stationery design, or in this case business cards. I do sometimes do letterheads for them if they need them. In this case he was kind of like okay with not having them. This is just some filler text for the time being. I put my own name in there, and then an example of what the business card layout might look. Now this little overlay here is a bit of a brand code item that I kind of incorporate, and I use this throughout, and you'll see it further later down the track. But it's basically just an extra little element, whether it's a pattern or it's an extension of the brand essentially. So I use that, and this in the final version of the business card just kind of is cropped just in this corner. Overlaying the bottom right of the business card. I actually have it shown as in full rather than cropped in, just because I preferred it that way. Later down the track, I actually show it fully cropped out. Over here is the typography. Now this is for web type, and I'm using this SF UI display typeface as an example. So here I've basically set it up and showing what it would look like if I was to go forward and build a website for the client. This is just showing him what the typeface would look like across the board, from all your H tags to your kind of display font, bold, etc. Further down here is some icons and marks. Most brands these days are extended onto social media, whether they need a Twitter icon or mark, or a for Instagram or Facebook or whatever. So I always like to present a mark or an icon version of the brand, and in this case it's either the SS logo or the actual superior seating. So I quite like this, and that works across all the different colors. So we can see, and I didn't illustrate that, but it's something that I would explore when I'm kind of outputting things for social media. I would explore that with the client and see what looks best. They might give me access to their social media accounts, and I can go in there and play around and see what looks best. This is an example of some marketing collateral, and it's the image is courtesy of Unsplash. I think it was taken by Fabio Ballasina. Really beautiful shot, and this is a type of chairs that this client actually sells. And this is an example of a mock-up kind of magazine style ad with some typography, imagery, and in the brand. And then again, this kind of diagonal line pattern, which is an extension of the actual brand, which is this S that was split in two. The client had requested that I kind of show him what it might look like if they were to wrap some of their delivery vehicles up. Now, this is just something I found online as far as a mock-up of a van goes, and obviously, you know, as designers, we're constantly needing to mock things up. So I simply downloaded the free or paid for it, I can't remember now, but I just quickly mocked up the brand on the van. I think it looks really beautiful, actually. I like the contrast between this dark and light, the use of these kind of diagonal patterns that I'm incorporating as part of the branding, and yeah, I think it actually looks quite beautiful. I would love to see that. And what I would do is, this file is obviously just an example mock-up, but if the client was to go ahead with this, I would prep the files in Illustrator, export a PDF that's in accordance with the sign writing. I get the sign writer to supply details of the specific vehicle they're going to wrap and the sizing and the rest of those details, and I would create the file that then fits that particular van template. And you know, sometimes you have to move things around depending on the van, where windows are and the rest of it, but it's just, you know, just another part of what we do as designers to incorporate the brand into various areas of the business. In this case, you know, on vehicles that are on road. This is the example design of the packaging, and all their boxes were to be, you know, branded as they, you know, they're kind of delivered to clients. They don't have a shop where you go in and pick up the chairs yourself. They're all delivered, and it's on purely online business. And these were my kind of versions of mocking up what the packaging would look like. In the end, because of cost restrictions, the client went for a purely black and white design, which was a little frustrating, but we made it work in the end. I don't have examples handy of what the finished product looked like, but this was my kind of ideal version. Sometimes you have to downscale on that based on budgets and costs and things. Again, bringing in this little S. Finally, what I do is put together this stylescape, and if you follow The Future, I think, Futur, no E, I think it's on via YouTube. Those guys talk about stylescapes, and I've been using this kind of medium or format of presenting a brand for a long time. And what I do is just put together this really beautiful horizontal panel, kind of quite wide, quite panoramic. And what it does is it starts with the brand in its most cleanest form, showing the color palette, any little marks and icons and things like stationery and business cards. I just try and incorporate a little taste of everything, including some sort of what kind of imagery I would expect the client to use throughout all their marketing, and how just setting the standards for the tone and the look and feel of the brand. Overall, this is what I walk through the client with. If there's any changes or tweaks, I just make some notes as I'm on the phone to him or her, and then I can make some updates. Figma's amazing because it actually then makes this their live brand guide, and they don't need to have a PDF that they can access and someone with Illustrator or Photoshop to download or open or edit the files. They merely go in here. You can share the file with them. They can go in here, and as you can see in Figma, if they need to export this kind of light version as a PNG, they literally click here, and they only have read-only access. So as a designer, I'm comfortable knowing that they're not going to go in and change anything. They can export that as a PNG straight to their desktop, multiple sizes. They can export as a PNG, JPEG, SVG, or PDF. And I run through that with them when I hand over the brand. And essentially, this is everything they need to kind of get their business up and running, and export all the elements they need, know what colors their brand requires if they're going to put together something else. And then if they need extra things like email newsletter designs, I would kind of just create multiple pages here and add them to this living brand that they have constant access to. So that sums it up. I'll kind of leave it there. If you're looking for some more kind of inspo, you can jump onto my Dribble account. Here's some brands and items and designs I've worked on over the years. I am also quite heavy on Twitter and like to tweet a bunch of different things, whether it's personal, fashion, design, or whatever, and obviously Instagram. So yeah, hit us up and let us know if you'd like to see more of this sort of stuff. It's kind of the first one I've done, but I think it's something that I would like to continue on, as I've done a bunch of brands over the years, and I think it'd be handy for new designers to kind of see how someone who's done this for a long time approaches it. Anyway, thanks guys, appreciate it.